A record field of 601 starters braved chilly winds and a steady drizzle in the 71st Boston Marathon.
The 1967 Boston Marathon was run in some of the worst conditions in race history. While most of the crowd was focused on the front of the pack, another runner was making a stir far behind.
The idea of running long distance was always considered very questionable for women because, you know, an arduous activity would mean that you're going to get big legs and grow a mustache and hair on your chest and your uterus was going to fall out.
In 1967, Kathrine Switzer was a junior at Syracuse University. Because Syracuse had no women's track team, she began training with the manager of the men's team, a part-time mailman named Arnie Briggs.
It was Arnie who told me about the greatest day in his life every year, which was the Boston Marathon. And we were out running, and Arnie began telling me another Boston Marathon story. And I said, oh, Arnie, let's just quit talking about the darn marathon and run it. And my dream then became to prove that I could run 26 miles, 385 yards.
For 70 years, the Boston Marathon had excluded women. But Switzer entered using just her initials.
We walked to the start, and the gun went off, and down the street we went. So there we were, Arnie Briggs, the 50-year-old mailman, and me, the 20-year-old college student, and my boyfriend, Tom Miller, the ex-All-America football player. When other runners would come by, they would say, oh, it's a girl, and they were so excited. And all of a sudden, the press truck is in front of us, and they're taking, you know, pictures of us. On this truck was the race director, the feisty guy by the name of Jock Semple. He just stopped the bus, jumped off, and ran after me. And he just grabbed me and screamed at me, get the hell out of my race and give me those numbers. He had the fiercest face of any guy I'd ever seen. And all of a sudden, Big Tom, my boyfriend, came with a streak and gave Jock the most incredible crossbody block and sent Jock flying right through the air and landed on the curb. And all of this happened in front of the press truck. Journalists got very aggressive. What are you trying to prove? You know, are you a suffragette? Are you a crusader? Whatever that is, you know? And I said, what? I'm just trying to run. Then it got very quiet. Snow's coming down. Nobody's saying anything. And I turned to Arnie and I said, Arnie, I'm gonna finish this race on my hands and my knees if I have to. If I don't finish this race, then everybody's gonna believe women can't do it. I've got to finish this race. I finished that race in 4 hours, 20 minutes. It wasn't until we stopped on the thruway to get an ice cream and some coffee that we see the newspapers and the coverage front and back of all the different editions with the pictures. I realized that now this was very, very important, and was going to change my life, and it was probably going to change women's sports. There is an expression in a marathon that you do go through sort of a lifetime of experience. And I often say that I started the Boston Marathon as a girl, and I finished the Boston Marathon as a grown woman.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here today. I'm wanting to thank also Bill Conroy and his fabulous team for putting together this amazing conference. What a gift this is. It's astonishing. You know, he's prepared to give you the greatest gift. This conference is prepared to give you the greatest gift of your life, which is empowerment. I'm going to talk about what that is in just a minute, but I also want to tell you, you know, I have been to this conference before in Chicago. What a wonderful time it is when we're all together and having a wonderful celebration of women's empowerment and sports and achievement and pushing ahead. But now we're going virtual, and what a gift it is also to be able to do this. And I'm coming to you from New Zealand. So I am 8,000 miles away, and yet we're right next door to each other. One of the greatest things I have learned from this virtual world is that I'm beginning to see and talk to friends of mine from all over the world that I haven't seen in many years and maybe never would get to see again. So here we are in a virtual world. This is an extraordinary conference, as I said, because it's designed to give you empowerment. And that's one of the two reasons that we began this conference with that astonishing videotape that you just watched from Makers, the Women Who Make America PBS documentary. I bet it looks ancient to you, doesn't it? I mean, it looks like something out of, you know, the Middle Ages. It's so old, but it's only 50 years old. And I know that makes me old enough to not only be your grandmother, but for many of you, your great-grandmother. But I want to tell you why that video is so important. The first reason is because it ends on awakenings. Awakenings. Awakenings are the moment when you're shaken in your life, when something really, really wakes you up and makes you realize something else, that some things have a bigger meaning than they first intended to be. That video was a flashpoint in history, not just sports history. Yes, it changed women's sports dramatically, but it was a flashpoint in human history. It went on to become not just about running, not just about sports. It became a social revolution. Now, what is a social revolution? A social revolution is not just when your mind and your attitudes change. It's when everybody's mind and everybody's attitude changes. That's why that video is so important. I went from being a girl who wanted to run to an activist, as you call it, a game changer. And it changed my life completely and put me in a completely different direction, which was very, very difficult, but also wonderfully, wonderfully rewarding. It changed my life and all of our lives in many ways. I was empowered by some things that happened to me on that day on the Boston Marathon course. And when we can make decisions for change, we can do it when we are empowered. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. The other thing that makes that video so important, there were two things, remember I said that, is that, hey, that's me in the video, ladies. You're talking to me. This is something that happened in my lifetime. That shows us how much change can happen so rapidly and how we can be people to make that change. Because for right now, I have to tell you that each and every one of you right now is in a flashpoint of history. The world has changed completely. And you are the young women who are going to either run and hide from those changes, or you're going to be the women who are going to take those negative parts of it, turn them upside down, and create a positive design for the future. If you're empowered, you can do this. If you're not empowered, you're going to run and hide. That's why being empowered is so very, very important. So I wanted to give you some solutions for doing this and how to become empowered. But how does it look? What is empowerment really all about? You know, it's such an overused word, and we hear it all the time, but do we really know what it means? Well, let me tell you what my definition of it is, in easy terms for you to understand. Empowerment is a sense of confidence, the confidence that you can control your life and your future, that you can get an education, that you can play sports, that you can succeed in a career and not just a job, that you can choose what you want to be and whom you love, and be fearless in the pursuit of your own life, of controlling your own life. And when you are empowered, you choose your own future. That's what happens to you. Okay, so let me tell you my story. And as I go along, I think you're going to hear some interesting little tips about what will work and empower you in your own life. Because basically, I think most of you out there are sportswomen, or active in sports or active in some way, maybe not. It doesn't matter. If you are an academic, that's absolutely terrific. Empowerment comes from many different ways. But one of the surest ways at first is also getting active and being healthy. So if you are not an athlete, start getting moving. It's very, very, very important. So let me tell you how I began. I was 12 years old when I began sports. My dad encouraged me to run a mile a day. He was a pretty conservative guy in many ways, but basically he really saw an insecure kid who was entering high school and needed something to hang her hat on. And he said, you should go out and run a mile a day and you'd make the field hockey team in your high school. And of course I told my dad, I couldn't possibly run a mile a day. That's really impossible, Dad. That's really far. He said, no, it's not. I'll measure the yard off for you. You can do it. And when I got out there to start running, he said, listen, honey, he said, it's not about going fast. It's just about doing the job. Just finish it. And try not to walk. Try to go through it and just keep it together. And I did that, and I was so excited. And he said, well, he said, you've learned one of your greatest life lessons. He said, just finishing the job often creates your future. He said, life is to participate, not to spectate. The game is on the field. You go out and have people cheer for you. It was astonishing, because at that time, everybody wanted to be a high school cheerleader. And my dad said, no, you really should cheer for yourself. People should cheer for you. You don't cheer for other people like that. You need to participate and not spectate. And so I said, okay, great. Well, I stuck with this mile every day. Some days it was really hard. We lived in Washington, D.C., and it was so hot and so humid. I thought I was absolutely never going to get through this mile a day some days. And other days it was easy. And that was another great life lesson I learned, that maybe all of you have begun to learn, that some days life is easy and some days it's so hard and it doesn't make any rhyme or reason. It is what it is, and you get through it. We call them lucky days, we call them bad days, but whatever it is. The interesting thing is, though, is that autumn I did make the field hockey team. And I know even today, at age 73, how it feels to hold a hockey stick in my hand for the first time, how it feels to connect with that ball. Just as many of you can remember the first time you kicked a soccer ball or learned to dribble or swung that bat. I mean, it is that moment of magic. And when I ran every day, an interesting thing happened. It was not just the hockey that was important to me. It was not just my team that was important to me. It was my sense of empowerment. I felt I had a victory under my belt every day that nobody could take away from me. And so the running became magic for me. And I hope that you find magic too. Basically, if you guys just keep moving, putting one foot in front of the other, keep swinging, keep doing your push-ups, keep doing your sit-ups, you will have that sense of empowerment, that victory under your belt that nobody can take away from you. This gives you the base to move forward and to do other things. I went on from that sense of empowerment to work in my high school, on my high school newspaper and the yearbook and the dance committees and all the things we had and all the activities. I was very active. But for a shy kid, it was the running that gave me the courage to walk into a room with strangers or to try out for something difficult and to try to reach even higher every time, and was always excited about the success I had. So of course there are fallbacks, of course there are failures, of course there are defeats, but the point is that you have the courage to try, and activity almost always will give you that sense of empowerment. The other thing I say about this is I also mostly talk to older people, talk to parents, and I tell them, look, it's our moral responsibility to give a kid every opportunity we can. And I mean that very, very sincerely. But what I would like you young people to do is to pass on that opportunity to your friends, kids who don't have opportunities. And you'll find that the more you pass on, the more you get back. Talent is everywhere. I don't know if you guys can imagine this. Talent is everywhere. Everybody has talent, but people don't have the opportunities. If you have the opportunity, you'll find your talent. Give yourself also that opportunity. Sometimes you think, oh, I'm not really talented. For years, I went along and said to myself, well, I'm not really talented, but I can just put one foot in front of the other. But I gave myself the opportunity to try harder, to go longer, to go faster. And amazingly, I did. And for an untalented person, I became pretty talented. So I will tell you also about how that story is, but please give yourself the opportunity, give yourself the ability to find what your talent is. Okay, the second component, as far as I'm concerned about empowerment, is education. I tried hard in school. I was not an A student. I was an average student. Part of the problem was I was put into advanced classes too early. I was starting school without kindergarten or nursery school at age 5. So I was always a year or two behind everybody, and I was always trying to catch up. The point is that I tried to catch up. At least I worked at it. And then I realized another thing. I realized I really loved sports. I really loved movement. But I looked at my life, and there was the Olympic Games, and the longest event for women in the Olympic Games in running was 800 meters, twice around the track. We used to call it 880 yards in those days. And I couldn't go fast. I knew I could go long, but I couldn't go fast. I was up to 3 miles a day. And I thought, well, what am I going to do when I get to be a grown woman and I don't have sports? I love sports so much. And I said, you know what? The thing I like best after running is I love to write. And so I decided, I've been writing for my high school newspaper. And in my high school newspaper, I always signed my name K.V. Switzer with my initials, because I was writing sports for the most part for my high school newspaper, which I absolutely loved. I signed my name K.V. Switzer because I thought J.D. Salinger was cool, E.E. Cummings, T.S. Eliot, W.B. Yeats, all these writers were really cool. So I wanted to be cool too. And the other reason I signed my name with my initials was because my dad misspelled my name on my birth certificate, if you can imagine this, okay? So my name was always being misspelled. So I started signing with my initials. And I decided, look, if I like writing so much and sports so much, why don't I decide to be a sports writer when I grow up? Well, this didn't go down really well with my parents. You know, they've got a daughter, you know, this is back in the very early 1960s, and the daughter wants to be a sports writer. Are you kidding me? She's not going to be able to earn a living doing that. But I said, if I have a good education, I can. And I went to Syracuse University. Now, this is a powerhouse university for sports and also for journalism, one of the best journalism schools in the country. Very expensive. My parents really had to suck it up on the cost of this. I felt bad about that. I still feel bad about that. But it was one of the best journalism schools in the country, and I wanted to get the best possible passport for professionalism that I could. This is another guideline. Try to get the best education you can. Even if you have to get loans and scholarships and things, please try to get the best education you can. Very competitive in the world, as we all know. Just try to give yourself the best background you can. And also because, you know what? You deserve a good education. You really do. Okay, so I went to Syracuse, studying journalism, writing about sports, and I thought, okay, if I can't play sports all my life, I can write about them. So try to find in your life something that will create the job that's not just a job, so that you play and you enjoy after you go to work. If you enjoy your work, if you really love it, it'll never be like going to work. It'll never be like having a job. It'll be a passion. And you'll work very, very hard, because when you're passionate about something, you work harder than ever. So choose something that really ignites you. While I was at Syracuse, there were no sports for women. Can you imagine this? The men had 25 sports, all of them scholarship deep, nothing for women. The women had play days. We had some intramurals, but nothing what I would call serious. So since I had played at a higher level in high school than I was going to be playing at Syracuse, I decided to ask the men's track coach. Okay, now, because I'm pretty feisty by now, right? So I go to ask the men's track coach if I could run on the men's track team. Cross country at the time, because it was the autumn. And he was stunned. He said a woman had never asked that before. No, I couldn't come officially, he said. It was against NCAA rules. But he said, I would welcome you if you wanted to come and work out with the team. You know, and as I closed his office door afterwards, because I was feeling great, okay, I'll go and work out with the team, I heard him burst out laughing to his colleagues. And I heard him say, well, I guess I got rid of that one. And I was so furious that he would think that I wasn't serious enough to come and train, that I showed up at the cross-country course the next day. I was very nervous, but I showed up. He was so stunned, but he was very polite to me. But an amazing thing happened. All the guys were wonderful to me. They welcomed me. They said, hey, we've never had a girl. This is great. And one guy in particular was a volunteer coach, and he was really old. I was 19 and he was 50. Can you imagine? And he had been an ex-marathon runner, and he really was so excited to see a girl. And he came over and he took me under his wing. He was now, as I say, a volunteer coach. He had run many marathons. He thought his days were past, but he took me under his wing and he began jogging with me every day. And he would tell me stories about this amazing race called the Boston Marathon. And I said, well, you know, I would like to run the Boston Marathon one day. And he said, well, a woman can't do it. And I said, why not? And he said, because women are too weak and too fragile. Well, boy, did I get mad. I said, are you kidding? I said, I'm out here running it with you. And tonight we just did 10 miles. We did 10 miles in a blizzard in Syracuse, New York. And he said, yes, but 10 miles is not 26. I said, come on, you got to be kidding me. If I can work my way up from 3 miles to 10 miles in just a few weeks, what can I do with getting up to 26.2 miles? Marathon, by the way, is 26 miles, 385 yards. And he said, a woman can't do it. We argued. I said, well, I know some women in history who have run the distance. My ancestors were great pioneers who were homesteaders who went out from the East Coast to the West. And we were in the wagon trains and we were sodbusters. And he said, no, I don't believe any woman could do that. And then I reminded him that a woman had run the Boston Marathon the year before. 1966, she jumped out of the bushes and ran the race. With that, he exploded. He said, no dame ever ran no marathon. And he said, come on, let's get going. And I said, you got to believe that I can do it, or I'm not going to run with you anymore. And so he hesitated and he said, okay, I'll tell you something else. He said, if you show me in practice that you can do it, I'll take you to the Boston Marathon. Hot diggity, I said. Okay, so we trained really hard. The days went by, the weeks went by, and finally the day came when we were going to run 26 miles, and I was so excited. We ran the 26 miles. I didn't feel like we had run far enough. And Arnie was saying, you look fabulous. I can't believe it. You look really, really good. His name is Arnie Briggs. And I said, you know, Arnie, I said, I don't think we ran long enough. Let's keep going for another 5 miles. He said, you can run another 5 miles? I said, sure, can't you? And he said, yeah, I guess. Well, anyway, so we ran another 5 miles. Now we're at 30 miles. We have 1 mile to go. And I could see that Arnie was beginning to pass out. I could see him weaving around on the road and his eyes had gone. He was gray. And I said, come on, Arnie, we can do this. And put my arm through his. I dragged him on it. Come on, we can do it. We can do it. 1 more mile. And we finished our workout, 31 miles. I flung my arms around him. I said, we did it. We're going to Boston. And he passed out. And when he came to, he said, women have hidden potential in endurance and stamina. Well, you know what? What have we learned? We've learned that women do have more endurance and stamina than men. We don't have the speed, the power, or the strength, but we have endurance, stamina, flexibility, and balance that men don't have. It's just that for 3,000 years of sports history, in the Olympics, women were entirely excluded. We never had the opportunity. We have the talent, we just didn't have the opportunity. And now we're finding women winning outright. You know, ultra races, 100-mile races, Grand Traverse races, 24-hour runs. These are very, very important factors in terms of our biology, that we can go the distance. We have more of a finesse game. We have more of a grace game, less speed and power, but we still have great speed and power relative to many other women. So there we go. We're now, and this is something I want you all to remember as young women who are pioneering the way, we have attributes that men don't have. Men have attributes that we don't have. It doesn't mean that they're better than we are or we're better than they are. It means we're different and we bring great, interesting things to the game, whether that's in sports, whether that's in business, or whether that's in society. And we can really, really work well together. And this is one reason why I love sports, and running in particular, is because it is a great melting pot. It's inclusive, it's diverse, it's egalitarian, and we respect each other. So that is very, very important to know. Anyway, now carry on with the story real quickly. Arnie helped me sign up for the Boston Marathon. I signed my name, Kathrine Switzer, on the entry form. There was nothing in the rules or on the entry about me not being able to run. And boom, into the race I went. The men were wonderful. And you know what happened. You saw the video. The race director attacked me in the race at the 1.5 mile point and tried to throw me out. I went on to finish because my boyfriend knocked him out instead. And I carried on with my team, okay? But let me just say this. Can you imagine what it felt like? To be just 20, to be still a girl who only went to Boston to run the race because she wanted to run. And somebody said, you know, you can't run, you don't belong here, and physically attacked you for doing it. I made the most important decision of my life, which was to finish that race. And I repeat what I said in the video, which is I would have finished that race on my hands and my knees if I had to. And how courageous and gutsy was that? I look back on it, I said, how did you make that decision when you were 20? And you know what? It's because I'd been running since I was 12. And I had that victory under my belt every day that nobody could take away from me. That's the important part of that story. The other important part of the story is that along about Heartbreak Hill in the Boston Marathon, which is at 21 miles, I stopped being angry. Well, you know what? You can't run 20 miles and stay angry anymore. Your emotions go. And I forgave the official. I knew he was a product of his time, but I knew then it was up to me to take responsibility for change. And I didn't know what it looked like. I only knew two things. I knew when I crossed the finish line, I wanted to become a better athlete, and because I wanted to prove myself. And the second thing is I wanted to create opportunities for women. And I didn't know what that looked like, but I was determined to make it happen. So training to become an athlete was the simplest part of the story. It was not easy. It took me 8 years. We campaigned to get women official in the Boston Marathon, which we were successful in doing 5 years after this incident. It took 5 years before they welcomed women in the Boston Marathon. That's a long time, ladies, as you know, in the life of an athlete. But in 1972, we were official. And I said, okay, we've done that. Now I'm going to dig in and I'm going to become a better athlete. It took me another 4 years to become a really good athlete. Trained very hard, knuckled in, trained up to 100 miles a week, double workouts. Not easy because I was working full time and also working on weekends, working at night to get a master's degree and to put my then husband through graduate school. So I had a very, very big workload. Nobody can tell me how difficult it was to train like that and to carry on with all the other activities, but we can do things when we need to do them. Always remember that. And when we want to do them. I finally ran an amazing time at the Boston Marathon in 1975, a 2 hours, 51-minute marathon. In 1975, that was the 6th best in the world and 3rd best in the United States. And for somebody who's not talented, it just goes to show you if you work hard, you can become talented. So you see the picture here of me crossing the finish line, arms outstretched. Yes, did it. And it was an amazing, amazing moment that carried with me through the rest of my life because I knew if I could do that, I could do anything. So there we go. What was the next step then? The next step then was to create the opportunities for women to be working on that. What I did is I began small. Don't think you can change the world overnight with something. When you have a good idea, write it down, start working toward it. Start small with the field that you can work with. I started creating a little club in my town of Syracuse, New York. I was still a student, and I learned how to do my press releases, get sponsorship, and it grew into a very, very big club. And then I decided I would go further afield, seek major sponsorship, and create what I believed was going to change the face of women's running, which was to try to get, wait for it, the women's marathon in the Olympic Games. And believe me, people thought I was a crazy person. You got to be out of your mind. Nobody's going to have a women's marathon in the Olympic Games. I said, why not? They have a men's marathon. We began working toward it. And I organized with major sponsorship at that time from Avon Cosmetics, a circuit of races around the world for women only. And to cut a long story short, eventually we had 400 races in 27 countries with over 1 million women participating. And I was in charge of the program. It was massive. It was a multi-million-dollar program, and I was 30 years old. Can you imagine that? To have such a huge, huge responsibility, but what a gift and a treasure to have a career like that. It was amazing to change women's lives in countries like Brazil and Japan and Malaysia and Thailand, where they never even had a women's sports event. That was quite phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And we could take the data and statistics from that event, those events, and show it to the International Olympic Committee and get the women's marathon into the Olympic Games. And here's a picture from the race that turned the tide. This is the starting line of the Avon International Marathon in London in 1980. And it looks like it's an antique picture, but imagine this. This was the first race that closed downtown London streets in history. And that race had 27 countries and 5 continents. It exceeded the International Olympic requirement for inclusion, and the marathon got voted into the Olympic Games. And here's the result. You see this wonderful picture of Joan Benoit winning the first women's Olympic marathon in 1984. And there are 90,000 people in that Los Angeles stadium, and they're screaming their heads off for this incredible woman of achievement. But try to imagine this. That wasn't the big change. The big change was because 2.2 billion people around the world watch the Olympic Games on television. And everybody knows that 26.2 miles or 42.2 kilometers is a long race. So if women can do that, they can do anything. And for me, that race was as important as giving women the right to vote, because it was the physical equivalent of the intellectual and social vote that we got in 1920. This was the physical acceptance. The marathon is the toughest event in the Olympic Games for men and now for women. So we had leveled that playing field. So where do we go from there? We still have to look around and realize that most women in the world have no opportunities whatsoever. And an amazing thing happened when this bib number that the race director, Jacques Semple, tried to pull off of me in the Boston Marathon. He got the corner one right there and ripped it. Tried to pull off of me in the Boston Marathon, suddenly became a number, meaning fearless in the face of adversity. And people were tattooing themselves with this number and wearing it because this story resonated so strongly with them. We captured this momentum and created something called 261 Fearless, which is a nonprofit around the world that empowers women through running and gives them the courage to take the first step. And as you know, all of you, taking the first step is the hardest thing. You just are too afraid sometimes. If somebody takes your hand and says, hey, walk with me, run with me, you'll go do it. And that's what 261 Fearless does, also with a really terrific educational program. So when you get to be 18, I want you all to join us at 261 Fearless, okay? You want more information, go to 261fearless.org. Okay, so now what is the end result here of all of this, all right? Here am I, age 73. And in the happiest moment, the happiest day of my life, I ran the Boston Marathon again for my 50th anniversary. At age 70, I came back after running the Boston Marathon 9 times throughout my career, crossed that finish line again. And the picture here that you see shows the young girl, age 20, getting attacked in the race. And she's the only woman in the Boston Marathon that year wearing a bib number in 1967. And 50 years later, the Boston Marathon was 50-50, 50% men, 50% women. And I was surrounded by 13,500 women wearing a bib number. Can you imagine how I felt? I felt wonderful. And I want to show you that picture because at age 70, to run a marathon 50 years later, I was the first woman to ever do that. But that's not testimony to me. That's testimony to how few women ran 50 years ago. Now you all will be running and playing and leading the way and opening doors for women. And it won't be unusual for somebody to do something 50 years later. I also show you this picture because I don't want you to be afraid of aging. Young women always are afraid of getting old and losing it. And let me tell you, you have more wisdom and more charm and more ability and more success. And it's never too late to be an athlete, and always pass it on to other people. Never too late to start. But one of the key factors to successful aging is to always stay active. It is the best thing you can do for your health, for your spirit, for your longevity, and also for your awareness of yourself and your empowerment. Because you know what? Older people need to be empowered too. And every day I run, and I've been running now for 65 years, it's magic. It still is magic. So I want you to realize that all of these points are stories that you can pass on and you can learn from your own running and your own fitness and your own ability in school and your own abilities in your job and as you look forward. So now we have some questions, and let me get to those really quickly. I'm taking a little more time than I should. The first question that came into me was, what were your biggest challenges physically while preparing for the marathon? Okay, well, the physical challenges for me was actually 2, and it's going to surprise you. One was lack of sleep. I had lack of sleep because I was working 2 jobs. I was trying to get a master's degree, put a husband through graduate school, and I was cramming 2 workouts a day in. So I didn't get a lot of sleep. And I often look back on that and say, if I could have gotten a lot of sleep, I think it would have made a difference. So if you can plan your life a little bit better than I plan my life, I still am short on sleep. I overextend all the time. make sleep a priority in your life. It's very important. And the other challenge I had was bad weather. Syracuse, New York has the worst weather of any city in the world. And that was, while it was a challenge, let me tell you, if you can run when it's 30 degrees below zero and you have 9 yards of snow, like we had the first winter I was there, it makes you very tough. So sometimes adverse conditions really work in your favor, because nothing surprises me now when it comes to weather in the start of a race. I can handle anything. So that's very important. The second question, have you ever had any injuries that prevented you from running? And if so, how did you deal with them? Let me tell you, I've been lucky that the injuries I have gotten have been accidents and not ones that are my fault. So they're stepping in a hole, tripping on a log, you know, falling down, hitting a hip or whatever. But the reason why I don't have overuse injuries is I take very good care of myself. And I do a lot of core work, a lot of other exercises, so that the overuse injuries don't happen so much for me. So what I'm saying is don't just do your sport, do all of the exercises and the core work, your abs, your quads, your hips, your glutes, do that work. It seems like drudgery, but it's part of it, and it keep you from getting injured. What advice would you give a young girl who aspires to be a professional runner? Well, I would give you this advice, is that if you want to be a professional runner, I would try all the distances first, even the sprints, the hurdles, everything else, to see what you're good at and what you like. The marathon will always be there. It's a long, long race, and you can start that later in your life, and rather than starting it off at the very beginning. But also realize, if you're going to be a professional runner, you don't have the same team spirit that you normally do with, let's say, a soccer team or a baseball team, you know, where every player counts on each other, except for cross country, in which case every runner definitely counts. But it's a little bit lonelier because you don't have so many companions. But and if you have talent as a professional runner, Olympic-sized type runner, in like, let's say, Allison Felix, you know, that kind of league, incredible, you're going to need a good coach. You're going to need a very, very good coach. And you're going to really need to train hard. Listen, there's no doubt about it. If you want to be an Olympic athlete or professional athlete, you're going to have to train your brains out. It's got to be the priority in your life, but that's okay. That's what you want to do. And everybody deserves to try to be the best that they can be. And sometimes you don't succeed at that. That's okay. It's the trying that matters. It's like my dad said, just finish it. What disadvantages did you have to overcome on your way to becoming the first female ever to run the Boston Marathon as a numbered entrant? Well, you know what? I just spent the whole talk talking about that. I had to overcome prejudice and people telling me I couldn't do it and that I was an idiot and all kinds of stuff like that. And you know what? That just made me tougher. But the question that hasn't been asked that I would quickly like to bring up is that right now, many of you probably can't meet with your team. Many of you have been having to train in isolation and are kind of thinking, oh, well, you're just going to sit on the sofa and work with your cell phone. I got to tell you, that's the worst thing you can do. You need to take this time right now, when you maybe can't be with the team and doing a workout or playing games, and absolutely training. This is your time to get really strong, to do those planks, to do the push-ups, to do the glutes, to work. You can work. You don't even need equipment. You can do all of this with your own body. You just got to be disciplined, and you got to do this. This is a time to make yourself really strong. Also work on your cardio. Go out there and do interval training, running. Even if you're a swimmer, you need to work on your cardio. You can't get in the pool, okay, run. You're still working the heart and lungs, and that's what you need to do. So be out there training really, really hard. So you do, so you do 50 push-ups a day. I want to see you do 100 push-ups a day. You don't have to do them all at once, but just get the number up there. Build up your strength. This is a really good opportunity to do that. All right? All right. I guess the last thing I want to leave you with is all my best wishes and your wishes for your success for the future, to realize that there's so much more you can do. And I just have some quick takeaways, which I think they're putting on the screen. And let me read them to you really quickly, which is that, remember this, you all have talent. You find your talent when you decide to keep practicing. It doesn't happen. Nobody hands it to you. You find it when you're out there working hard. Okay, we're having a big problem right now with COVID-19, and maybe your whole schedule is upset. Always remember that a big problem is often an opportunity. Remember there was no Olympics a marathon for women? I looked at it another way and I decided that this is an opportunity to create opportunities for women around the world. The third thing, stay fit all your life, because when you feel physically powerful, you have the confidence to take on tough challenges. When you feel powerful, you are powerful. Okay, the fourth one is our world has changed forever. Don't fight it. Embrace the adventure. See how you can contribute and make good, positive change. And the last thing is, you can change direction, but never quit. Don't quit. Never quit. You're tougher than you think. Okay, good luck to all of you. Cheers.